Hello everyone, I am the Lore Explorer, and this is Kerbal Space Program, a critically acclaimed rocket building and spaceflight simulator. And after putting over 1,000 hours into the game, I finally felt confident enough to accept the hardest mission assigned in the career mode, a return mission to Eve. Or at least it was a land on Eve and a plant a flag on Eve, so two different missions, but they both require an actual manned landing on Eve and return mission, which is tough. So in today's video, I want to take you all along with me in my proudest moment in achieving something in Kerbal Space Program, and maybe help some people build up the confidence to be able to do this themselves as well. Now, as you may guess, to be able to build a rocket that can carry a rocket large enough to launch from the surface of a planet with a thicker atmosphere and one that's larger than our own is ridiculous. You have to build a humongous rocket, and the beast I've built here is like over 1,000 tons. To get this thing moving and high enough in the atmosphere, I had to put on 56 Clydesdale engines, all auto-strutted to each other and then to the main core of the stage. And with these 56 roaring, we can see it flowing. But with so many parts, I have over 2,000 individually simulated parts on that rocket, and my computer's really chugging along right now to keep up with it. Each stack of those engines weighs so much that my standard Separatron rocket setup to, make them separate just wasn't enough. I had to put shrimp engines, actual larger solid rocket booster engines, to make those separate cleanly. And once they do separate, 28 massive Mastodon engines spring to life. Something interesting to note here is my thrust to weight is not above 1.0, yet it's still adding to my velocity and my periapsis, so I just went along with it because I didn't really want to gain that much velocity that quickly because then I'd bleed it all off rushing through the atmosphere. So I'm fine with having just 1 or 1.2, but I'm sure this is not the most efficient way to do it. But we're still getting there, and once I get my periapsis to around 80 kilometers or so, I feel comfortable enough to be able to make my ejection burn from that. And that's right when my second stage is done feeding its fuel into the other two side tanks, which in turn is feeding its fuel into the center tank. So we still have enough, fuel to get our ejection burn. We got enough to keep going here. So I just make a quick note for the circularization, ditch our fairing, and then fire up the engines to get our circularization burn nice and pretty. Now each planet you go to has its own ejection time. It has its own launch window is what they call it. But the game has a nice little tool for you to be able to do this. So it's called the maneuver node tool, and you just want to, put in what planet you want to go to, boom, and it makes the maneuver node for you. After you make that node, go to the map and target and focus view on the planet you're going to, which in this case is Eve, and get close to the node time, maybe 15-20 minutes, and slightly adjust it so when you arrive at the planet, you're going prograde just around the equator. And even after making this burn, even if it's really accurate, you're likely going to have to do a mid-course correction because you're not going to get it perfect from your ejection burn. So I usually do about halfway through the orbit, like halfway to my target, or if you can, on a descending or ascending node. They don't always work that well, but in this case, I'm using it. And I just slightly adjust this node to make it so I'm going about my periapsis, I want to be around 100 kilometers, so 100,000 meters, or it can be a little farther out and just make sure I'm on that equator. That's the important thing. We can fine tune and adjust all that later. These short correction burns are better made far out from the planet, not when you're up close, because you're using a lot less delta V when you're farther away. You're not having to fight the gravity of Eve, so you're going to want to do it further away. So when you're getting there, you're in the right place. All you got to do is slow down. And that's basically where we are right now. So all we have to do here is make a quick retrograde maneuver node, a slowing down maneuver to, get captured by Eve and get in orbit. Now, we're approaching Eve at going around like 4.5 kilometers per second, and we're just going very, very fast. So we have to full thrust this bad boy and just put on the brakes, go as slow as we can, well, not as slow as we can, but we got to bring it down to around 3,500 meters per second. So we got to do a 1,000 delta V burn. That's a lot of delta V to slow down, but that's what we got to do. And we over-engineered this rocket because we knew this would be an issue. So that's why this rocket is going to dump some stages before it even lands, because I knew, I had to put some extra fuel on here just in case something bad happens. But luckily, nothing bad really happened, and all we have to do is a quick, simple retrograde burn. Now we're captured, we're down to the main core of the stage, and I'm just gonna, fine-tune my orbit. So like I said before, both the periapsis and apsoapsis is around 100,000 kilometers. So because the atmosphere starts around 90 kilometers, and what we want to do is be able to pick our orbit pick our landing spot very carefully, because we do not want to land in the water on Eve. So we want to get a nice close orbit where we can pinpoint accuracy pick where we want to land, or at least well enough. Now's probably a good time to start talking about the Eve landing. This is such a difficult landing. To get through the atmosphere of Eve when you're descending is very tough. It's so thick, it's almost like hitting a brick wall at times. And if you're not slowing the whole craft down equally, then it's gonna flip over. You also kind of need a lot of heat shields. You can't just have regular heat shields. You need the big inflating heat shields, and they have a lot of drag. So if you have more heat shields on the bottom than you do on the top, again, boom, you're gonna flip over, you're gonna blow up in the atmosphere. It's just a bad time trying to get through Eve's atmosphere. But that's what we're getting ready to do. We're doing a quick retrograde burn to bring our periapsis down below 90, well below 90. I'm bringing it around to maybe 30, something like that. So I know that I'm gonna land no matter what, and I'm gonna land in the near area where my periapsis was. So I'm just getting this set up so I know I'm gonna land on land, basically, is the crux of it. And hopefully maybe some high land, because if you land on a mountain range that's 3,000, meters up, that is pretty significant when it comes to Eve. But I can't really tell all that from up here. We're just gonna land where we land. What we have to do is detach these, I have two stages that are almost, one's half used, one's not used at all. I gotta get rid of both of them so that when we're entering the atmosphere, they don't slow down or come back and hit the main craft and blow me up. Then, once we're safely decoupled from those bottom stages, we can go point back retrograde and actually inflate our heat shields and get ready to enter the atmosphere. Now, as I mentioned, you kind of have to make sure the whole craft is being slowed down evenly. That's why I have 4 heat shields inflated at the bottom and 4 at the top. And there's a little bit of extra drag from the 5th one at the bottom, even though it's not inflated. So I do have some aero brakes on the top as well to give it a little bit of control. And I had to make sure this was all strutted together so the aerodynamic forces of Eve didn't rip this craft apart as it's flying through the atmosphere. So there's a lot of things you need to contend with here, but just keep a cool mind and just keep going. Just to make sure I was being safe and had enough time to do everything, I opened my parachutes at around 5,000 meters from the ground. That's the highest your drogue chutes can deploy from. And this way, I can actually decouple those docking node things at the top, so the top heat shields can just safely sort of float away. You see, very simple, very easy, and I don't have to worry about those anymore. And, if I just decoupled them, they might keep falling and come down and hit me later. This is just an easy way to get rid of them. Now I know I don't have, aerodynamic surfaces on those outer 4 stages, but they're the first ones to decouple anyway, and they only have a couple seconds of burn time anyway, so I'm not that worried about that. But now we're falling nice and slow, and I kind of wait until the craft is going as slow as possible before I decouple the bottom heat shields, just so there's no issues with clipping or anything like that. Like I said, they're all strutted together so they fall at the same time and equally. And for the love of God, be sure if you've you've definitely had to strut them to your ship to make sure it stays whole on its descent. So just go ahead and destrut them, and make sure you do that at the top too, or else it might cause some issues. So definitely destrut the attachments between the decouplers and the ship, but make sure the decouplers are all attached together so when they fall as one. And as you saw, even if they do fall as one, there's still going to be some explosions, but it was safe for the craft this way, so that's how I did it. Then you want to extend your landing legs, and you're going to want a lot of landing legs because it is very unforgiving on the surface of Eve. The surface gravity is so high that it will start blowing up some of these landing legs, no question. And if you're not using advanced tweakables, like I didn't even know about at the time, the landing leg springs are going to be so strong, it's going to start bouncing your ship back and forth and spreading across the surface, blowing up landing legs here and there. So I just kind of raised some here and there until that issue stopped, and then boom, I had a safe landing on Eve. Or at least safe enough. I mean, yeah, surface is blowing up my landing legs, but Valentina's a pro. She's just gonna handle it. She climbs down the ladder and does what any normal human being would do if you traveled so long through space, and she risked her life to do it, so she's gonna go up to this giant, beautiful specimen of a rock and claim it as her own. And with that, she's pretty sure her journey to Eve was worth it. But that's not really the hard part done. It's kind of the hard part done, but we still have to get back through Eve's atmosphere, which is tough. And we still got a few things on this spaceship that aren't really necessary for takeoff. So what you're gonna do is put all of your parachutes on radial decouplers, and then boom, radial decouple those bad boys, shoot them off, let them go flying. We don't need the weight. And we're going to actually do the same thing with the landing legs as soon as we take off. You can set the staging so you take off and then just hit it again for your landing legs to fly off. We don't want to be carrying that weight. And you can see how these are all feeding into each other. Each one of these stages are feeding into each other, so the middle one will still be full as all the other ones die out. And one thing you want to make sure you do is actually open up these fuel tanks for their readout, because they're going to be draining so fast that the staging thing on the left isn't going to be able to tell you accurately when they run out, and you don't want to be carrying that dead weight. So I know landing legs are blowing up right now, but it's too important for me to bring all these things up so I know when to stage correctly. It's also pretty important to keep your thrust at a pretty low level. There's a ton of engines on this ship, and we need to keep our speed below around 400 meters per second while we're still below 10,000 meters in the atmosphere. Here, I started about 50% thrust, and I gradually went down from there as I felt my speed was kind of getting too high. And right now, we're barreling through the atmosphere. It's so thick that if we were to go above 400 meters per second, your entire ship would just flip because it doesn't have aerodynamic control enough to fight through those forces. But if we take it nice, slow, and steady, which may be a little counterintuitive, we're going to have a much easier flight. So even up halfway to 10,000, I'm going as slow as possible. I'm trying not to speed up. Just keep that speed right in the sweet spot, and you'll be fine. And you'll see, this isn't even entirely an issue with being too low in the atmosphere, because even at 35 kilometers, my ship starts flipping in the atmosphere. My ship was going too fast and flipped over. Luckily enough, I over-engineered it enough, put more fuel than needed, so it had more than enough delta V to just kind of flip on back over and keep flying. Again, the atmosphere at Eve ends at about 90 kilometers, so I wanted to get my apoapsis way above 90 kilometers just to be safe, just to make sure I had enough time to gain enough vertical velocity to actually achieve orbit. So we just kind of go all out here. I don't know why the staging was a little messed up with that one. I forgot to put decoupler, like the symmetry for the decouplers on that one wasn't there, but just make sure it's there and that'll go a lot easier for you. And now we have 2 full stages on this ship, and you know, I thought I'd only need the top one to get back in orbit, but we kind of need to spend this whole stage and a little bit of the next one. So we kind of built it just right. This ship was never meant to fly all the way home. It was always meant to just get us back into orbit, and then we can rendezvous with another ship and we can go home that way. And we do what comes out to be a pretty quick circularization burn, even though it's pretty high delta V, because we got a high thrust engine and a pretty, lightweight craft here. So it's gonna get in orbit in like 30 seconds of thrust, and that's the hard part done. We're basically finished, because if you got here, you know how to do interplanetary transfers, so you know how to get back to Kerbin already. Just send a craft here, rendezvous with this craft, send Valentina onto the other craft, and take her on home. One thing to be careful about if you're doing this on your actual career mode like me is be sure to grab the science from this capsule before you board the other one. So don't just do a transfer, or maybe you could do a transfer of the data directly to the new capsule, but don't forget that data. I didn't bring a lot of science because I wanted a lightweight ship, but I am happy with what I got here. So we're just gonna do a very easy rendezvous with the ship that we've already sent to take us home. And of course, we have Valentina do a little spacewalk instead of just transferring all the science, and then we're basically ready to decouple this small ship and get the heck out of Dodge. And luckily for us, the maneuver node tool is a thing, so we don't even have to know when to get home or how to get home. The game has done this for us, and to be honest, I think that's kind of accurate because you would have people at Kerbin doing all of those calculations. Jebediah and Valentina wouldn't be the ones doing them, so that actually makes sense to me. All we have to do now, make that maneuver node and follow it home. One thing to mention, if you're planning to go straight into Kerbin's atmosphere from the Eve transfer, you're going to be going super fast. So either have a very large heat shield or just, get there and get into a stable orbit around Kerbin before you try to descend into the atmosphere. That's what I tend to do, even though I bring a large heat shield. I just feel like it's safer, but this is the hard part done. We're just sailing home from here. And of course, as soon as Valentina gets home, she's going to be received with a hero's welcome, probably with a large cup of orange juice and maybe some ice cream. So, if you appreciated the video, please leave a like. I really love Kerbal Space Program, and I kind of just wanted to show everybody that yes, Eve's intimidating, but you can get it done with persistence, and it's worth doing. I really don't know why, but after 1,000 hours in Kerbal Space Program, actually finally achieving this feels like an actual accomplishment. I do feel proud of myself. I'm happy I was able to do it, and I'm happy I was able to bring you guys along with me. So, if you appreciate the video, consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel, of course, and thank you to all the members here on the channel. I really appreciate all the support you guys have shown, just personally. I really do appreciate that. So, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next video.